Hi boys and girls, it's Thinking Thursday, and today I have a fun experiment for you to do with some simple materials, and it's going to be fun, so let's get started. All right, today is all about Humpty Dumpty, and we're going to see if Humpty Dumpty can swim or not. All right, so this is all about sinking and floating. So, first of all, the name of our experiment is Swim, Humpty, Swim. All right, what we'll need are some simple materials, but what we're trying to find out today is if Humpty Dumpty will sink or float. And what you need for your experiment is an egg, just a simple egg, and if you can, with a permanent marker, draw a little face so it looks like Humpty Dumpty. All right. The next thing you need is a clear jar. It has to be clear. So some type of clear container and fill it with just plain water. The next thing you need is some salt, just regular table salt. Now it calls for a half a cup, and it tells you that eventually you're going to put the salt in the jar or your container 1 tablespoon at a time. So make sure you have a tablespoon and then a regular spoon so we can stir it. And those are your materials you'll need. Okay. The other thing you need is we are going to make what's called a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is a guess. So before, children, we start our experiment, we need a piece of paper with a big rectangle on it, and you're going to write above it, my guess. This is where you're going to draw a picture of what you think is going to happen before we get started with the experiment. And then underneath that, you need a box, again, a rectangle, and this one says what happened. So after we do the experiment, then we need to draw what actually happened. Okay? You'll need 2 of these papers because you're going to do it one time with just plain water, and then another time you're going to add salt. And we're going to do it again and make a guess first before we start the experiment after the salt is added to our water, and you need to draw a picture. And then after we observe and we look at what happened, then we draw what actually happened. Okay? So we will be observation, viewing these, and then we're going to come to a conclusion. Is Humpty Dumpty going to sink or float in the water? All right, so those are the things you need right now. Okay, let's go over some vocabulary. Here's some vocabulary. Sink. Well, what does sink mean? Sink means to go down or below a surface. So is Humpty Dumpty going to go below the surface? The surface is up here, sitting up here. Is he going to sink below? Okay. Is he going to go down? All right. Floating. Floating means to remain on top. Is Humpty Dumpty going to be floating on the water? Is he going to remain on top? Or is he going to go all the way down to the bottom? We shall see. Okay. Density. We're going to talk about density. And density means how heavy or how light something is. Okay. For example, if I have this jar full of water, that's going to be heavier as if there was the jar without water, because water has density. It has some weight to it. Okay. So it has mass. So it's going to be a little bit heavier in the jar, and this is heavier to hold. And if I spill the water out, it would be less dense because it would be lighter without the water. And buoyancy. Buoyancy is the ability to float on the water. Is Humpty Dumpty going to have some buoyancy? Is he going to float at all in our experiment? Well, we shall see. All right, sink, to go down to the surface. Float, to remain up on the surface. Density, how heavy or how light, okay, something is. And buoyancy, able to float. All right, remember, right now I need you to pause, get your materials, and then I would love for you to do your guess, okay? So we need our rectangles, 2 of them on a piece of paper, and then get another piece of paper and do 2 more rectangles, okay? Now, what we need to do is we need to see in the water, just plain water, is Humpty Dumpty going to sink or is he going to float? So this is our first experiment. After you get your materials, I want you to draw a picture on your guess. In just plain water, is Humpty Dumpty going to sink or float? I would like you to make your guess. Okay? Pause the video at this time. Okay, boys and girls, I'm back. I have my materials. The only thing I really need right now is a jar full of water or some clear container full of water and an egg with a nice little face of Humpty Dumpty on it. Okay? The other thing you need is your paper that has the 2 rectangles on it. Remember, your first top box is your guess. So what do you think is going to happen when Mrs. Gatson or when you drop the egg into the water? Okay, so let's see. I predicted that Humpty was going to sink, and I wrote sink. I practiced one of my vocabulary words for this experiment. So I drew a jar with some water, and I put my egg, Humpty, on the bottom of my jar because I think he is going to sink to the bottom. So let's see what happens. Hopefully you have made your prediction. If you haven't, stop this video, make your prediction or your guess. All right, here we go. I'm gonna carefully, and I think I'm gonna take my spoon because I don't want him to break. And I'm gonna carefully put him in the water. Look at, he is so heavy in the water, he has sunk to the bottom. So, my prediction, my guess is right. I predicted that Humpty in just plain water was going to sink, and I was right. So now I'm going to stop the video and I'm going to draw what happened, okay? Because he's so heavy, he has so much inside of him in the egg, his mass is heavier than the water and he has sunk down to the bottom. So I'm going to pause and draw what happened. All right, welcome back, students. All right, as you can see, Mrs. Gatson drew her picture of what actually happened in our experiment. So with plain water in a clear jar with just an egg, I was able to make the correct prediction. And yes, Humpty Dumpty sank. So I just wrote on here, Humpty sinks in plain water. All right, now I'm going to get Humpty out and let him dry off. And I'm going to begin adding my salt. Okay, so it said I needed a 1/2 cup. Parents, if you don't have a 1/2 cup, it's okay. Use as much as you can to a 1/2 cup. I know sometimes some experiments can be a little expensive or you might not have all the materials, but let's watch what happens. So right now I'm going to add a tablespoon because it said to add a tablespoon at a time and then stir it. Ooh, what are you observing so far, students? Well, I'm observing that my water's already turning cloudy. Okay, now I'm going to add another tablespoon. So it said in the directions to go really slow as you are adding and making sure that all that salt is getting stirred up in the jar. Now I'm going to add another tablespoon and I'm going to stir it again. Whoa, my water is getting so so cloudy. I can barely see anything. I hope I'm going to be able to see Humpty when I drop him in there. All right, let's do another. All right, stir it. And I'm going to just add the rest. Ooh, my goodness. And I'm stirring, and I'm stirring, and I'm stirring. All right. So now I'm going to place Humpty in to the jar. But before I do, boys and girls, you have to make your prediction. Will Humpty Dumpty float or will Humpty Dumpty sink? Now that I've added salt into the water, what do you think is going to happen? Stop the video and make your prediction. Draw your picture. Will Humpty sink to the bottom or will he float? Will he stay up on the top? All right, go ahead and draw. All right, we're back. We're going to finish up our experiment. So I'm ready to put Humpty Dumpty, my egg, inside the container, the glass container with salt water in it. All right, here we go. Let's see what happens. Look at that, boys and girls. Humpty is floating. He's up on top. I'm going to move it a little bit closer so you can see. He didn't sink to the bottom. Oh my goodness, he's floating. He's staying above the surface. Look at him. Wow. Was that your prediction? Well, that was my prediction. I said that Humpty was going to float, and I even put dots in my water to make it look like salt, and I wrote the word float. Now I can draw a picture on what happened and draw Humpty floating up on the top. Why did this happen? How could he float? Well, by adding the salt, it made the water more dense. It gave weight to the water, like it added something that was a little bit heavier to the water. Before it was just plain water right out of my sink. And now by adding salt, all those little salt particles in there have weight to them. They're heavy. And it's made the water heavy, so it keeps the egg afloat. It keeps Humpty staying up on the surface. So that is what happened in our experiment. 1, when we had plain water, Humpty sank to the bottom. He was heavier than the water and he just went right down to the bottom. As we added salt to the water became heavy, more heavier, more density added, and it was able to keep the egg afloat above the surface. I hope you had fun with this experiment. All right, try it on your own if you haven't done it yet. Make sure you're drawing your predictions. Your hypothesis is the real big word, and that's your guess. And then after you do the experiment, you draw your picture to see what actually happened. All right, have a good Thursday. Bye-bye.